The locker room was nearly empty, the distant sound of showers running echoing against the tiled walls. I had just finished practice, exhausted, my body aching from the intense drills. The scent of sweat and shampoo lingered in the air as I pulled off my jersey, exhaling deeply. Then, just as I reached for my towel, the door swung open with a sharp creak. "Hey, man! Didn't expect to find you here alone." I froze. That voice, I knew it too well. It was Ryan, my best friend since childhood, the guy who could walk into any room and light it up. But he wasn't supposed to be here. He never lingered after practice, always the first to leave, always in a hurry. Something about his tone, about the way he leaned casually against the lockers, sent a ripple through my chest. Was it nervousness? Excitement? I wasn't sure. Yeah, I muttered, forcing a chuckle. Just taking my time. He took a step closer, his eyes locking onto mine with something different. Something unspoken. I swallowed hard. The room suddenly felt too quiet, too charged with something I didn't understand. And then, he surprised me. "My name is Alex Carter. I was your average high school senior, captain of the swim team, decent grades, and a well-practiced smile that hid more than it revealed. On the outside, I had it all together. Inside, that was a different story. I had spent most of my life perfecting the art of blending in. It was easier that way. In a town like ours, small, conservative, with a boys-don't-cry kind of mentality, standing out was dangerous. Especially for someone like me. I had known I was different for a long time, but I had learned to ignore it, to push it deep down where no one could see. I focused on swimming, on early morning practices and late-night study sessions, anything to keep my mind too busy to wander. And then there was Ryan. Ryan Brooks had been my best friend since elementary school. He was everything I wasn't, loud, carefree, always the life of the party. Where I was cautious, he was reckless. Where I hesitated, he jumped in without thinking. He had an effortless charm that made people love him. Including me. But I never let myself think about that. It was just friendship, I told myself. Just admiration. Nothing more. The swim team was our shared world, a space where we both thrived. Coach Bennett ran our practices with military precision, pushing us past our limits every day. The team was like a second family, loud, rowdy, competitive, but there were unspoken rules, things no one dared talk about. Like why I never dated. Or why I always laughed off the jokes about which girl I should take to prom. So, I played along. I kept my head down, went to parties, smiled at the right times. I had convinced myself that this was enough. That I could live like this forever. Then, Ryan started acting different. It was subtle at first. A lingering look, a joke that didn't sound like a joke, a touch that lasted a second too long. I tried to ignore it, but the tension between us grew stronger every day, like an invisible thread pulling me toward something I wasn't ready to face. And now, standing half-dressed in the empty locker room with him staring at me like that, I realized something. Maybe I wasn't the only one hiding. Ryan took another step forward, the dim fluorescent lights casting a soft glow over his face. His usual cocky smirk was gone. Instead, there was something else. Hesitation, maybe even nervousness. "Hey, Alex," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "Can I ask you something?" I forced a chuckle, trying to shake the tension in my chest. "Since when do you ask permission for anything?" Ryan didn't laugh. He rubbed the back of his neck, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Do you ever feel like—" He paused, exhaling sharply. "Like you're not really being yourself?" My stomach tightened. I tried to play it off, grabbing my towel and pretending to be focused on my locker. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean," he said, his voice firm. I turned to face him, my heart pounding in my ears. Ryan was watching me carefully, like he was waiting for something. An answer, a reaction, anything that would confirm whatever was running through his mind. I started, but the words caught in my throat. Then, before I could think, before I could stop him, he reached out and placed a hand on my arm. It wasn't a casual touch. It wasn't a playful shove like he usually did after a joke. It was different, gentle, intentional. I felt frozen, like the entire world had just narrowed down to this moment. To his touch. To his eyes searching mine. And then he said it. "I think I like guys, Alex." The air left my lungs. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but never with him. Never with the one person who had been a constant in my life. Ryan let out a shaky breath and laughed, but it wasn't his usual confident laugh. It was nervous, unsure. God, I sound so stupid right now. Forget I said anything. But I couldn't forget. My brain was racing, my body still frozen in place. Because in that moment, I wasn't thinking about how impossible this was, or what it meant. I was thinking about how much I wanted to reach for his hand and tell him he wasn't alone. But I didn't. Instead, I did what I had been doing my whole life. I looked away. I let out a forced chuckle, shaking my head. "Come on, man. You're messing with me, right?" The silence that followed was the heaviest thing I had ever felt. Ryan's hand dropped from my arm. His face changed, just for a second, but it was enough. A flicker of something hurt, something I had never seen before. "Yeah," he said quickly, forcing a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Just messing with you." And just like that, the moment was gone. But I knew, deep down, no matter how much I wanted to ignore it, nothing would ever be the same again. The next few days felt like a blur. I went through the motions, practice, school, homework, pretending that nothing had changed. But it had. Everything had. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ryan's face in the locker room, the way his expression had flickered between hope and fear. The way I had crushed that hope with just a few careless words. I wanted to believe that I had done the right thing, that it was safer this way. But the weight in my chest told me otherwise. Ryan was different now. Not in any obvious way. He still laughed too loud, still made ridiculous bets with the team, still acted like the world was one big joke. But I could feel the distance between us. It was subtle, almost invisible, like a thread that had once held us together was starting to fray. He stopped showing up early for practice. He stopped waiting for me after school. And worst of all, he stopped looking at me the way he used to. I told myself I was imagining it, but deep down, I knew better. One afternoon, after a brutal swim session, I caught him alone in the parking lot, leaning against his car with his phone in his hands. He didn't notice me at first, and for a second, I just watched him, trying to remember what it felt like before things got so complicated. I finally forced myself to walk over. "Hey." He glanced up, his usual smirk in place, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, man. What's up?" I wanted to say 1,000 things, but all that came out was, "You've been quiet lately." He laughed, shaking his head. "Nah, just busy." Busy. A word that meant nothing and everything at the same time. I hesitated, then pushed forward. "Listen, about the other day." Ryan cut me off, his expression tightening. "Forget it, Alex. It was stupid. Let's just drop it, okay?" But I couldn't. Because the more I tried to push it away, the more I realized that I wasn't just avoiding him. I was avoiding myself. Days passed. Weeks. I threw myself into swimming, pushing harder than ever, hoping that exhaustion would drown out the thoughts circling in my mind. But nothing helped. Every stolen glance, every almost touch, every unsaid word between us felt heavier. And then, one night, everything cracked wide open. It was at a party. One of those wild, sweaty, music-blasting gatherings where the entire school packed into someone's house. I wasn't even sure why I had come. Maybe I was hoping to feel normal again, to lose myself in the crowd. But then I saw Ryan. He was across the room, leaning in close to a girl I barely recognized. She was laughing, her fingers grazing his arm, and Ryan was smiling, but it wasn't real. It was the same smile I had practiced 100 times. A mask. Something inside me snapped. Before I could think, I was pushing through the crowd, my heart hammering in my chest. "Hey, can we talk?" I blurted out. Ryan turned, blinking in surprise. "Now." "Yes, now." He hesitated, then nodded, following me outside. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but I barely felt it. For a long moment, we just stood there, neither of us speaking. Then Ryan sighed, rubbing his temples. "What is this, Alex?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know. But I think we need to talk." He let out a bitter laugh. "Do we? Because last time I tried, You made it pretty clear where you stand." I flinched. I was scared. Ryan's expression softened, but there was still something guarded in his eyes. "Yeah, I get that." The silence stretched between us, heavy with things unsaid. I lied, I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "That night in the locker room, I knew exactly what you meant." Ryan stared at me, his jaw tightening. "Then why did you pretend you didn't?" "Because I had spent my whole life running. Because admitting it felt like stepping off a cliff with no idea if I'd land safely. Because I was terrified of what it meant. For me, for us, for everything." "I don't know," I said, and it was the most honest thing I had ever said. Ryan sighed, shoving his hands in his pockets. "Alex, I can't do this alone." "I won't." I felt my chest tighten. "You don't have to." He studied me for a long time, searching my face like he was looking for something real, something true. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he nodded. "Okay," he said. "It wasn't much. But it was a start." The journey ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be more fear, more doubts, more nights spent wondering if we were making a mistake. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't running away. And that had to mean something. The weeks that followed were a slow, unsteady dance of unspoken truths and careful steps forward. Ryan and I started spending time together again. Not like before, but something different, something heavier with meaning. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. But just when I thought I was figuring things out, life threw me a test I wasn't sure I could pass. It was a regular Friday practice, the last one before a big meet. The entire team was in the locker room, the air thick with sweat and exhaustion. Guys joked around, towels snapped, and laughter echoed off the tiled walls. Then, out of nowhere, it happened. "Hey, Carter." It was Mason, one of the seniors, grinning like he was about to start trouble. "You and Ryan have been spending a lot of time together lately. Something we should know." The room went still. My stomach dropped. My heart pounded so loudly I swore everyone could hear it. Ryan, who had been pulling on his sweatshirt, froze for just a second, so brief no one else probably noticed. Then, with the ease of someone who had mastered the art of pretending, he smirked. "Yeah, Carter," he teased, shoving my shoulder lightly. "You got a crush on me or something?" Laughter erupted around us, the kind that felt sharp-edged, like a test I didn't know how to pass. This was the moment. The choice. The moment I had run from my entire life. I could laugh it off, roll my eyes, play the part one had perfected for years. I could let it go, pretend it meant nothing. Or, I could finally tell the truth. My hands clenched into fists. My pulse roared in my ears. I turned to Ryan. His smirk was still in place, but his eyes, they were asking me something, pleading with me. "Don't do this. Stay safe. Stay invisible." But I was so damn tired of hiding. I took a deep breath. "Maybe I do," I said. The laughter stopped. The air in the room turned electric. Mason blinked, caught between amusement and confusion. "Wait. What?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry as sandpaper, but I forced myself to stand taller. "Maybe I do," I repeated, my voice steadier this time. A few guys exchanged looks. Someone let out a low whistle. I heard a muttered "holy shit" from the back of the room. Ryan just stared at me. For the first time since I had met him, he looked completely, utterly speechless. The silence stretched. Every muscle in my body braced for impact, for the laughter, the insults, the rejection. And then, Ryan did something I never expected. He grinned. Not his fake, practiced smirk. A real grin, one that reached his eyes. "Well," he said, slinging an arm around my shoulder, his voice light but firm. "That makes two of us." And just like that, the air shifted. The tension cracked, replaced by awkward chuckles and a few nods. A couple of guys shrugged, like it wasn't their problem to care about. Mason muttered something under his breath and walked off, clearly disappointed he didn't get the reaction he wanted. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't some grand moment of acceptance. But it was enough. Ryan's hand squeezed my shoulder for just a second before he let go. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. The moment in the locker room changed everything. It wasn't some dramatic, world-shifting revelation where everyone suddenly understood. Some guys still gave me side eyes in the hallways, whispered behind my back, and a few even stopped talking to me altogether. But for the most part, life went on. The world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. And Ryan was still Ryan. The first few days after I said it out loud, things between us felt strange, like we were both adjusting to the weight of something new. We didn't talk about it right away. Instead, we let actions speak louder. He still sat next to me in class, still texted me stupid memes, still challenged me to races in the pool that he knew he'd lose. But there was something else now, something unspoken but real. One afternoon, after practice, we sat on the bleachers, our hair still wet from the pool. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the water. Ryan leaned back on his elbows, watching the sky. "You really meant it, huh?" he asked. I didn't pretend not to understand. "Yeah." A slow smile spread across his face. "Took you long enough." I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't help smiling too. "Was it scary?" he asked after a moment, his voice quieter. I thought about it. "Yeah." "Terrifying." Ryan nodded, like he understood exactly what I meant. "Yeah." "But I guess we don't have to be scared alone." That was the thing, wasn't it? Fear felt so much heavier when you carried it by yourself. But now, I wasn't alone. Still, I wasn't naive. Just because I had taken this step didn't mean everything would be easy. There were still moments of doubt, still people who weren't ready to accept it, still a part of me that wondered if I had made a mistake. But then, there were also moments like this. Moments where I felt like I could breathe. The next big test came at the swim meet. I had expected things to be different, to feel like an outsider in my own team. But when I stepped onto the pool deck, nothing had changed. Coach still clapped me on the back, telling me to focus. My teammates still shoved Gatorades into my hands, still smacked my shoulder before I dove into the water. I swam my hardest that day, not just for myself, but for the kid I used to be, the one who spent years hiding in the shadows, too afraid to live. When I touched the wall at the end of the final lap, I looked up at the scoreboard. First place. And when I climbed out of the pool, dripping and breathless, Ryan was the first one there, grinning as he pulled me into a hug. That moment meant more than any medal ever could. After the meet, as the team celebrated at a local burger joint, I felt the weight of the past few weeks lift off my shoulders. Mason, the same guy who had called me out in the locker room, slid into the booth across from me. For a second, I braced myself, unsure of what was coming. He shrugged. "That race was sick, man. You killed it." I blinked, caught off guard. Thanks." Mason picked at his fries, not looking at me. "Look, man, about what I said before. I was being a dick." I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, you were." He chuckled. "I don't get it, but I guess it's not my business. Just keep swimming fast, all right?" It wasn't a grand apology, but it was something. A step forward. That night, after everyone else had left, Ryan and I walked down by the lake, the cool breeze cutting through the warmth of the day. He nudged my arm. "You good?" I took a deep breath, looking up at the sky. "Yeah," I said. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. I had spent years running, hiding, convincing myself that who I was would never be enough. But now, I knew better. I was still me. Still Alex Carter, still a swimmer, still the same guy who loved bad action movies and hated math. But now, I wasn't afraid to be seen. And that made all the difference. A year later, everything was different, and yet, in so many ways, exactly the same. College applications had been sent, swim meets had come and gone, and the world kept spinning. Life hadn't magically become perfect, but I had stopped waiting for perfection to start living. Ryan and I both got accepted into universities with strong swim programs. We wouldn't be going to the same school, but that was okay. We had promised each other that no matter where life took us, we'd always have each other's backs. Some people still whispered when I walked by, still stared a second too long, still seemed unsure of what to do with me. But I didn't let it bother me anymore. Because for every awkward glance, there were teammates who stood by me, friends who never wavered, and a future that no longer felt like something I had to fear. One evening, before graduation, Ryan and I sat on the roof of his car, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "Think we'll be okay?" I asked. Ryan smirked, nudging my shoulder. Dude, we've made it this far. What's a little more life gonna do to us? I laughed, shaking my head. And for the first time, I truly believed it. We were going to be okay.